Hello, welcome to LLG's Random But Real podcast, where you'll hear conversations about any and all things random with an entree, not a side dish, of mental health advocacy. I use my performance, communication, and literary art skills to bring awareness about mental health and other topics. Therefore, whether I'm singing, speaking, or writing, it is my desire that my words will be melodic, just like music to your ears. Welcome to LLG. That's me, Lisa L. Gilliam's Random But Real podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Stigma Breakers edition, LLG Random But Real. Today, we're talking about grief and loss, and I'm excited to be here, of course, with Ashby or Lockley now. You know, Ashley got married. We talked about that last month. And Dhyana Parker for Rock for Life. And then we have a special guest, Dr. John Nielson. I just want to tell y'all about him real quick. Dhyana Parker for Rock for Life. And then we have a special guest. Okay. So sorry about the echo. Again, I will apologize. It's late because I was having technical difficulties again, but that's all right. Y'all know I believe that when something's supposed to go forth well, that sometimes Satan tries to steal, kill, and destroy. So it's all good. Anyway, so we are here. We're excited to be here. I'm happy to be here, and just really want to welcome you all in this broadcast. Basically, I met Dr. John 4 years ago after my mom died, and today is actually her 4-year death anniversary. And people always ask me why I celebrate both, or they think I did a tribute to her today on social media, and some people are saying happy birthday, but it's not her birthday. It's the day she died. I celebrate both and I honor both because her birth meant something to me, because clearly that's how I got here. If she wasn't born, I wouldn't be here. But her death impacted me in ways that I never thought I would be impacted, especially after my dad died in 90. I've shared some of my story, but I don't talk about the grief as much as I do other things. And oftentimes people think I'm stuck in the fact that my mom died. Let me be clear. I am not. My mom loved to dance. She was probably praising God, dancing all around heaven, having a ball. However, there have been so many different things that have happened to me since her death that probably would not have happened if she wasn't dead. And that's where, after finding my grandmother dead in 1995, 3 days before Christmas, and walking in on my mom being unconscious and her never speaking, the 2 weeks that she had to go to the hospital, that's where the PTSD was triggered. And that's what I'm working through. There are different stages and different kinds of death. And today we just want to talk about it because I know my mental health has been affected by it, but it's not because she's dead. So I hope that that's clear. And so Dr. John was so pivotal. I met him. Are you still doing Grief Share in where you are now?
I'm getting ready to get it started again up here, especially for college students, which is going to be really exciting. But yeah.
Awesome. So he was the person who led Grief Share. You might have to mute when I'm talking. I don't know why it's feedback. And although I went through it 1.5 times because I started it on week 9, which coincidentally, I still remember the topic was guilt. And that's how I felt when my mom died, because I didn't make her go to the hospital. But my mom was a nurse and she knew how to take care of herself. And so I'm still working through the things that I feel. I meant to grab my tissues because I think I'm probably going to cry. So if I excuse myself, y'all know I keep it real. But that's why I wanted him on here. So before we get to you, Dr. John, I just wanted Danya or Ashley, because I know that they've had significant losses in their life too, to just share, a significant loss that they may have had. And just anybody who's watching, know that grief can happen even when it's not death. So it could be a relationship. It could even be a pet. Grief and loss, sorrow from it, it's still the same. So Ashley or Danya.
I can share quickly. I think the most impactful loss by way of death that I've experienced was my older brother 2 years ago, April of 2019. That seemed to usher in a couple of different losses subsequently. But he was 36 years old, so very unexpected. Um, and so there are there are things that are still very fresh, parts of the grief that are still very fresh. Um, but uh, Definitely probably the most impactful loss that I've had as far as that so far. Um, and still trying to process what that means for myself and our family and his son, um, and his widow. So just everyone still trying to process through a lot of that. Um, so yeah, that's what I'm sure. Thanks.
So the hardest death with me and my family was the death of my youngest brother who died by suicide. I know we all are going to deal with death at some point in our life, but that was the hardest, to lose him by suicide, and he was 24 years of age. So I still deal with it, and sometimes I do deal with a little bit of guilt as well. So that one was hard.
Definitely understand that. And thank you all for sharing. I know it's not easy to talk about this, which is so ironic because everybody knows if you live that at some point you're going to die. We may not know how, right? The only thing we can control, they say, is that dash in between. However, this is, I think it's an important topic, but I know it's one that's so taboo. We just don't talk about death. Like, we don't prepare. We don't have wills. We don't have living wills. We don't have insurance, life insurance. Not everybody. And it took my mom, honestly, dying for me to be no. I need to do. I need to get this in order. I need to have a doing business ads on my bank accounts just in case something happens. So that someone can, be able to access my money and not have to be stressed out until life insurance kicks in and all of that. So, with that being said, Dr. John, one of the most important quotes, I guess, that I learned from Share is, well, it's not really a quote, but moving forward is different than moving on. And people think that's semantics, but it's not. I'm telling you that like helped me to my soul. So could you explain that and what that means and how it correlates to like death and dying or just loss in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so important to remember that this is a process and to think about grief as a journey and that there's not a single way of going through that. Right. And I think a lot of times we expect there to be certain timelines, or I should experience this in a certain way or in a certain order. And the reality is we're all going to process that, experience that very differently. And I think we do a disservice to one another when we make those assumptions, right? Or we say, well, you should have been over this by now, right? As if we'll ever get over that, right? And so grief isn't something that we get over. It isn't something that we that we just kind of process and finish up and we're good to go. It's going to be a lifelong journey through that loss, and things will be forever different, and that's okay. And I think one of the challenges, as you say, is that we don't have good models for talking about it. We don't have, we're so uncomfortable with it ourselves that we can't be a help to one another because we aren't practicing, right? We don't have that sort of model of how to talk about it. But yeah, to assume that we're going to move on past this is not realistic, right? But we can move forward, right? We can continue in this journey, and we can, with God's help, make progress. But it will not be through just sort of specific, right? Step 1, 2, 3, here's the list, and I go down, check the boxes, right? We all know, I've heard of the stages of grief, and it's helpful at one level, but I know the person, or not, I don't know the person, but I know that the person who developed that later on felt like it had been misunderstood, like it was stage 1, then stage 2. It's more different aspects of grief, and we can move in and out of those at different times. And so that's why it is this journey, right? And we know that it's not something we get over. It's not something we move past, but we do want to move. We do want to move forward, and we do want to know that we can continue to live in this space where we don't Um, we don't fully set aside our sorrow, our grief, but we also allow, life and joy and love and relationship to be part of that and to become part of that. And it's not, I have to fully address my grief so that I can move on with life. My life will now, have this intertwinedness with the loss that I've experienced. And where there's great love, then there can be great sorrow. And we don't want to get over that, right? We don't want to get over the love. We don't want to get over the loss. We don't want to get over the importance of those relationships. But we do want to move forward, and we can get stuck in grief. And so we do want to keep moving forward, but that's not saying that we're going to get over it in any sense.
So, Dr. John, I have a question. For some people's understanding of it, could it be that relationship that they had with that person, that they weren't as close to this person, so it didn't affect them the same way it might affect you? I've never lost a parent, so I can only understand how Lisa may feel. I never lost a child, so I could never understand that. But I would never tell anybody how long they should hurt or they should stop grieving. So is that part of the process, is because they didn't have that type of relationship with that person for them to feel a certain way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the uniqueness of our journey, because we had, we had the different relationship with a person, but we're also different people, right? And we process things in different ways, and that's okay. And we need to give space, freedom. We need to give people permission at times to grieve in ways and in times that are important for them. Yeah, and I think you're spot on that we never want to say to anyone, well, by now you should have, A, B, or C. It's going to be a unique experience. Our relationship with that person was unique to us, but our own personality and makeup and so forth is also a unique factor of how God has made us, wired us. And we'll be in that journey in different ways, right? And people will go through grief differently, will process grief differently. Even the emotions of grief might be radically different. And sometimes it can be difficult because we don't understand why someone is emoting in a certain way or feeling a certain thing, because it isn't how I process grief, right? And grief can mess us up, right? So, I mean, there can be any number of kinds of responses, which is, again, why stages isn't linear 1, 2, 3, right? I can feel guilty. I can feel angry. I can feel, very, very sad. I can feel confused. I can feel a whole range of things. And in fact, one of the healthy exercises, I think, is even, and there's a helpful chart actually that Grief Share puts out of just a list of kinds of common grieving emotions. And it's like, it's not exhaustive, and it's still got 50 kinds of emotions, right? And just going through a list like that, and even physically checking off, these are all the things that I feel right now, and naming those can be a helpful, part of that processing. But the other aspect of that is helping us realize that someone else may have a different list. And so there's a comment there. Is it okay to give space to grieve alone? Yeah. Sometimes we need community, right? We need friends, relationship. There's other times that we need space. And we don't always know what that person needs at a given moment. And so what do? Oh, we could actually ask them, right?
Exactly.
Do you need, is this a time? Do you need some, time to be alone? I want to respect that. Anytime we enter into a relationship with someone else and their grief, we want to enter that with humility. We want to enter that prayerfully. We want to enter that cautiously, and we want to enter that without presumption. And know that we are often best serving that person when we are simply present and listening and weeping with them, and saying very, very little. Most of the time we get into trouble, it's like Job's friends. They had it right for 14 days until they opened their mouths, and then it was downhill from there. And sometimes, our desire, right, to help, and our desire to say something, it may in fact be the last thing that they need, right? And so to enter that with a care and prayerfulness, and really focusing on the needs of the person, right? And if that's need to be alone, if that's a need. Now, again, we want to check on people. We don't want to abandon them. We don't want them to ever think that they are alone, even if they need some alone space in a given moment to process that. So there are ways of checking in, right? And just know I'm here, right? I know you need some time, and I respect that. I'm going to honor that, but know I'm here to be present with you, to sit with you in grief, right? Our Jewish brothers and sisters have this tradition of sitting with people in their grief. And I think we can learn from that, of just being present, right? And letting them help us know, when they need more than that.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Can y'all see why I love him? Like, even the way he speaks to you is with such calmness, and like the reframing is amazing. It's ironic. I say this all the time. When my mom died, Ashley, well, even when she went into the hospital, it was 2 weeks. She literally, I think out of everybody I knew, if it wasn't every day, I think it was every day though, she checked on me every single day. What do you, even down to the practical things? You need toothpaste, you need toothbrush. Because I was spending the night, like 2 nights at the hospital, like all of my family changed time. It was such a blessing. She never pushed me. And then also because I have had a mental health diagnosis, which you were saying about not necessarily leaving us alone. You leave someone like me alone who has dealt with mental health issues, then I might think about taking myself out. That's just the reality. And yes, being a Christian and loving Jesus and still hurting, I might have, been in that place. And so I know that people get busy. I understand that. But one of the biggest things I've learned is that if you haven't experienced such a gravity, amount of loss, I think my first funeral was like, I was 3 or 4 years old. So people have died all my life. So I never expected to have just to have this outcome of the pain that I feel. I literally was doing the tribute to my mom. I wanted to do it last night so I could remember to like post it like a little bit after midnight, because unfortunately I still have insomnia sometimes. And I broke down but that song always makes me cry. Every time I see Set It Off and I listen to the song Missing You, I cry because those lyrics, even though it wasn't about a parent, are so touching. But that's how I feel about my mom. And I notice that a lot of people are so uncomfortable to talk about death that they will shy off. What do we say to people as, we're speakers, we go out, we help other people talk about mental health, that are so uncomfortable when it comes, like it's not going to ever happen to them? Because it will, as long as they live, it's going to be somebody, or better yet, the people who say, well, like you were talking about, I just don't react like that. So, like you should just they literally have said, get over it.
Just get over it.
Yeah. I think, there's a number of things there. And another thing that you mentioned speaks into this, because not only is it about normalizing the conversation and being okay talking about our loss, our sorrow, and that's a vital part of it. It absolutely is. But we also have another obstacle. And ironically enough, it can be our misunderstanding of sort of the optimism of our Christian faith. Our Christian faith gives us an anchor in sorrow. It does not make us immune from sorrow. Exactly. We like to quote the verse, and I believe it full-heartedly, right? That we, as followers of Jesus, because of the resurrection, we do not sorrow as those who have no hope. And that is absolutely true. Our sorrow, when we know Jesus, our sorrow can be infused with hope. But if that statement is true, and it's in the Bible, it is, right? If that statement is true, we do not sorrow as those who have no hope, then I like to say that the inverse of that statement must also be true. And that is that we do not hope as those who have no sorrow. And so we have hope, but that doesn't mean our sorrow goes away. It doesn't mean that we won't experience loss. We can believe completely in the resurrection and your mom dancing, in the Lord's presence, even as we speak. That doesn't take away the loss that we feel. And sometimes we've over spiritualized our experience in grief, so much so that we've violated our humanity. And even our Savior, who is a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, who wept, lots of times, right? His, over Jerusalem, right? He weeps over the tomb of Lazarus, even though he knows he's about to raise him back to life. Why? Because he he entered into the humanity of our sorrow, and there was a reason to weep, right? And sometimes when we over spiritualize our loss, again, for good reasons, right? I don't think our motive is always wrong, but we end up telling people, if you were a better Christian, you wouldn't feel so sad. And that to me violates who Jesus is. It violates the scriptures that are full of lament, full of sorrow. And yes, taking that sorrow to God, right? That's lament. Biblical lament is not just the sorrow, it's taking that sorrow somewhere, and we take it to the one who understands that sorrow. But it doesn't negate the sorrow, and it doesn't mean that, if I'm experiencing all of this range of emotions and I'm struggling, right, in my grief, that somehow I'm a lesser of a Christian. That's simply not the case. And so another place that we can help normalize it for people is when we don't do that for those around us who are feeling that sorrow, right? Who are going through that. And we say, yes, we believe in the hope, right? Yes, we know of the resurrection. But we also need to sit with the grief. We need to sit with the loss. And if for no other reason than Jesus models that for us. As a pastor, so I was a pastor for 30 years before moving into the role I'm in now. And so sitting with a lot of people in times of loss. And again, we believe in celebration of life. We believe in Easter. We believe in resurrection. But sometimes we want to bypass the sorrow of Good Friday to get to Easter. We want to bypass the sorrow of what we're experiencing to focus on resurrection. And again, that does a disservice to Scripture. It does a disservice to our humanity. It does a disservice to our understanding of God when we want to jump over that, right? I'll never forget, and this were the literal words out of her mouth, someone that I was working with preparing a service, a funeral service. And it was, again, another one is we want this to be a celebration, right? Which, again, I understand, but it needs to also give space for the loss, right? And so the comment was, Pastor, we don't want any crying at this funeral. And I said, well, I understand that we want to celebrate a life lived well, and we'll do that. But I miss him. And I'm sure that I'm going to shed some tears. And so I hope it's going to be okay for us to weep, right? And we need to be able to weep so that we go through this process of lament. And part of that sorrow, giving that sorrow to God, is acknowledging it, not denying it, not ignoring it, not, kind of making it go away because we believe in, everlasting life, which we do, right? But that doesn't negate the need, right? And I always wanted to make our celebration, for example, Holy Week leading up to Easter, if we want to just jump to Easter and miss the sorrow and the suffering and the loss and the death and the darkness and the cross, we've done a disservice to the gospel. It's not the full gospel unless it holds both those things together. So that's too long of a response for me. But I just think the importance of recognizing that it's about talking about it, normalizing that conversation, but it's also about saying it's okay to be a person of faith and still be processing our sorrow. And again, I can take you to place in the scriptures where we see that model for us. In fact, this whole concept of lament, which is actually the focus of the doctor work that I did, is really in this practice of lament. And the presence of that as a biblical prayer, language, permission, vehicle, journey, that we can do something. We have a place to turn with our sorrow, but it's not about ignoring it. It's not about dismissing it. It's not about, saying, well, you shouldn't feel that way. And even if we don't do that, even if we give permission for people to do that for a little bit, we shut that off pretty quickly when we say, okay, well, it's time to move on. Well, we don't move on. Yeah, at least as you said, we don't move on. We do move forward, but we don't move on.
Also, Dr. John, sometimes when you trying to process the journey or go through the journey, and you feel like you're talking to someone that understands or appreciates you, and then you feel that they don't, that tends to make you shut down and then make the process even harder.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we are given a sacred moment. If someone, and again, I appreciate both of you share, all three of you, but sharing your own journeys and stories a little bit of your loss. And when someone opens that and says, here's a loss, here's a grief, here's a sorrow. I love using this language of sacred sorrow, because that is a sacred moment when someone opens, we open our heart to kind of let someone into our journey. And if we are dismissive, if we are, well, you should be beyond that, anything that we do that doesn't honor and listen and value that person and their experience, they will then have a natural tendency to withdraw further. And then we're not going to be, the help that I believe God would have us to be, to sit with them in that grief. And so again, my rule of thumb is, we need to talk less and, cry more. Yeah. And I like to do this too. If you're in a public setting, say if you're in a worship service and someone gets up, starts to share, and they start to cry, what is the next thing they will say?
Either I'm sorry or I apologize.
All the time. I guarantee you, if someone gets up and they start to cry in a public setting, especially in a church setting, and they start to cry, the next words out of their mouth will be, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. We apologize for our tears, and that's when I know we have a problem.
Wow.
I remember you saying that in Grief Share too, and that is so good. Like, it's okay to feel however you feel. Your feelings are validated just because you're human. And God actually gave us tears. But I think the uncomfortableness of, this is what I've learned. I'm also a restorative approaches site coordinator at my school. And one of the practices is being present, which is mindfulness. And it's really hard for people to sit in their stuff.
Oh.
Whatever feeling they have, except for maybe joy. But then when you have someone like me who grew up with low self-esteem, I don't know, really, sometimes you say, great job, Lisa. I'm like, thanks. I could have done that better, or really hard on myself. And I don't think that my grief journey has been any different, although I probably have been in my grief journey longer than I've been in my joy journey, because like I said, I experienced death at such a young age. It bothers me when people, I've been open about, going to counseling. Like, you still going to counseling? Yes. And I'm also still hurting. And if you think about a 4-year-old child or toddler or whatever, a 4-year-old is not a long time, right? That they've been on the earth. So I don't feel like 4 years is a really long time. I'm better than I was last year. That's what you should be asking me. Are you progressing? Is it still as heavy as it was for you before? Like, if you genuinely care about me, I'll tell you the answer. But I don't want to hear, did you cry last night too? You always talking about your trauma, whatever. I'm at the point now where if you don't want to hear it,
don't
listen to me.
There you go.
It's okay. Because I know people have literally called me and thanked me for the videos that I put up. And sometimes I didn't expect to cry in the midst of it, but I started crying. I'm surprised I haven't broke down yet, but I thank God that I haven't, because that shows me that I am growing and I am healing and I am getting better. And it shows somebody else that there's still promise on the other side. And I have those ebbs and flows that you would talk about all the time in Grief Share. And sometimes I am depressed. I'm still shocked. I still see where my mom was the last time I spoke to her, which was 2 weeks before she died. It still feels like yesterday. I sometimes can't even believe I just talked to you and now you're gone. And then when she died, it brought back all the memories I had of my father, who died in 1990. So you never know how you might be triggered. So I just want to encourage people to be careful, because I made the mistake too. There was people whose mom died before mine, and people were like, oh, it's your mother. For me, it wasn't the fact that it was my mom. For me, it was the fact of the way she died. Her being a nurse and not being able to take care of herself. That's what triggered me, because she took care of so many other people. So then how do you deal with, because I didn't have anger at first. And then all of a sudden I did, Pastor John. Well, Dr. John, you're both to me. So how do you deal with the anger that is one of the steps, how do you deal with the anger when you're like, even especially when you're a Christian, you just like this, I know you're all knowing, but this don't make any sense, God.
again, the book of Psalms is such a great gift to us at this point,
Yes.
because the book of Psalms shows us that there isn't any emotion that we can feel that God can't handle and that God doesn't receive as a form of prayer. And so what makes it biblical lament, what makes it the sacred sorrow, even anger, right? That um, is that we don't just hold on to that in ourselves. We take it somewhere, and we take it to God. And so to name it in God's presence, my sorrow, my anger, my frustration, my confusion, my loss, my dread, my emptiness, my guilt, all of these things, right? We offer that as gift. We offer that as sacrifice. There's this wonderful song by singer songwriter, biblical scholar in my mind, Michael Card, that invites us to come lift up your sorrows. The chorus says, "Come lift up your sorrow, come offer your pain, come make us sacrifice of all your shame. There in the wilderness, he's waiting for you to worship him with your wounds, for he's wounded too." And this idea that to offer my sorrow to God is an act of worship, because it's an act of trusting God with what I'm experiencing and feeling. To pray about even my anger, my guilt, because I take it to God, it's an act of trust. It's an act of relationship, right? You don't talk to people. You have to know someone well, right, to share certain things with. So if I share that with God, it's a demonstration of my relationship with God. It's an act of prayer because it's communing with God. And it's an act of worship because I'm acknowledging, God, I can't handle this, but you can. So I'm going to offer this to you. And it's even the nasty stuff that I'm feeling, right? Even doesn't feel very much like Jesus feeling right now, but let me give this to you. And when I give it to God through prayer, when I offer that as a gift, as an offering, as a sacrifice, any of it, right? Any emotion I'm feeling, then it's a demonstration of relationship, of trust, of prayer. It's a form of prayer, and I would contend it's a form of worship, because I'm acknowledging, God, only you are great enough to handle this, because I can't handle this. If I keep this to me, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be destructive. So I need to take this somewhere, and I need to take this to you. And that's what the Psalms teach us, that there is no feeling that we can feel, no emotion that we can have, that God doesn't understand, that God doesn't allow us to be able to give voice to, right? We know it's not where we're going to end up, right? And when the psalmist says, God, you're not even here, are you going to forget me forever? The psalmist knows that that's not really true, but in that moment, that's how they feel, right? And they take it, they name that, and they aren't afraid because they know God can handle that. And then in the process of grief, all the Psalms of lament except one have, just this offering of complaint, right? God, why is it this way? Anger, emotion, sorrow, fear, frustration, right? We offer it to God. And then all of the Psalms of lament except one have this turn, this but I will trust in your steadfast love. I will still, I will yet praise you, right? I'm not feeling it right now, God, I gotta be honest, but I'll get there. I like to say that there's one. So if you ever want to read a Psalm of lament that doesn't turn, it's Psalm 88. It just laments to the end, and then it says, I'm out, done. I like to say that there's one of those so that we know if we ever feel that way, it'll be okay. There's only one, so we don't get into a habit of that. But God can handle that. It's an act of relationship. It's an act of trust. It's an act of prayer. It's an act of worship. And so I take my sorrow to God. I take my anger to God. I take my guilt to God, right? All of the emotions I feel, I take to God, who understands, who cares, who listens, who doesn't reject me, who gives me the space to live with that. And then eventually, like he does with Job, he'll say, so, remind me where you were when the foundations of the earth were formed. You were there, right? Oh, yeah, no, you weren't. Maybe you can trust me with this. Right? So we'll get there, right?
But Dr. John, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No.
What you just said is it's extremely hard, and I know for me it's hard, and I think also with the other two young ladies it's hard when you start giving that trust, because I don't share a lot, but I'm starting to share. But when I'm comfortable with sharing to you, that means that you mean enough to me to give that part of me. And a lot of people don't understand that. Being a speaker, we have to tell our truth. So I can't sit here and say I did XYZ or I didn't, and then try to tell you to do something. So I'm making myself transparent, but it's also scary because sometimes it could be used against you, but you're also trusting whoever you're relaying it to. So I know, like I said, with me, it's extremely hard. And I'm sure with the other two young ladies, we've had this conversation before. It's really hard. And it makes us shut back down. But being a speaker and trying to tell our truth, dealing with mental illness, that's a hard process. So it's like we're defeating ourselves. We're putting ourselves back at another stage instead of moving forward because we trusted someone and that came back at us in a bad way.
Yeah. And again, and even that, right, that experience is another loss, right? It's a loss of that relationship. It's a loss of trust. It's a loss of, I had hoped you were someone that could be a safe place for me to share. And obviously it seems that is not the case. And so that pain, that becomes then another grief, right? And so that's another thing. And you said this right near the beginning, Lisa, that, you know, this whole topic is not just about death. It's about death insofar as it's about loss, but we experience loss in all kinds of ways. And anytime that we experience loss, there's grief. And anytime we experience grief, then Scripture gives us this language of lament as a way of responding to that. And so I might grieve that relationship that I thought I could trust, and then it turned out I didn't. And I need to do some of the same grief work that I did with the loss of a loved one to death. I might need to do in that situation. There's a wonderful writer in this topic. Her name is Pauline Boss. She was professor out in the University of Minnesota. She wrote a number of books on what she calls ambiguous loss. And ambiguous loss is the kinds of things that maybe someone else doesn't understand and wouldn't see as a loss, right? And she uses some examples. She talks about the basic categories of ambiguous loss are when someone is either psychologically present but physically absent, or the other way around, physically present but psychologically absent. So, for example, a spouse whose partner has Alzheimer's, and they are physically present, they are alive, but they are losing them a little piece at a time, and they are emotionally, psychologically, they are not present. That person is experiencing loss now, but the reality is until his or her partner physically dies, we don't have any corporate way of coming around typically and saying, you know, I acknowledge your grief and your loss. The grief started way back before because the loss was already in work, already in process, right? But it was ambiguous, right? We don't have, you know, funerals for that diagnosis. We don't have the same way for the parent whose child is a victim of addiction or has run away or is missing. There are all these things and other kinds of things that we experience, you know, that are lost, right? We lose a job, we lose a relationship, we lose an ability, you know, we have something physically happen and we're still alive and we're thankful for that, but we can't do something that once gave us joy. Growing old and dealing with some of that progressive of things that we can't do anymore, right? The loss of a friendship that I thought I could trust and now I can't. And it's loss. And because if it's a loss, then we ought to be able to and need to go in through the process and practice and journey of grief. And if there's grieving, then, and we're a follower of Christ, then the Bible gives us this language, permission, a vehicle of expressing our sorrow to God. And again, if we can't do it anywhere else, we have that place that we can do it. But then we treat as gifts, right? Those places that we do have that ability to trust someone with our broken heart, right? And so the importance of not violating that when someone, you know, shares and opens themselves up, not dismissing, not second guessing, not lecturing. And again, Job, to pull Job's friends back in. Well, you know, if you had done this differently, you know, you'd have been better off. You probably did something and we can blame the person experiencing the loss and not even realize that that's what we're doing. And so the importance of naming all of these things as a loss and all of these things as worthy of grief. And again, a person may not understand that the loss of this pet that was their one companion, now that a husband had passed away, and now that companion is gone too, how that compounds the other loss, right? And to say, oh, that was just a pet. You shouldn't feel this way. We are missing the point when we respond in those kinds of ways, because loss is loss is loss, and any loss needs grief, and will lead us to grief. And when we are experiencing grief, we need to do something with it, and it's not to ignore it, and it's not to sort of make it go away and say, well, one day heaven, yes, but now sorrow, right? And I live with that, and I name that, and I don't think that I'm less of a follower of Christ and less of a Christian if I experience that. And when we indicate that, even if we don't come out and say it, we're really violating our shared humanity, and we're violating Scripture, because the clear pattern of bringing that sorrow to God means that it is there, right? We don't hope as those who have no sorrow. We will feel that, and we should. If we don't, right, it really is because of, right, when there's great love, then there's great loss. I wouldn't hurt so much if the person didn't matter.
Exactly. People don't realize also, I'm sorry, Lisa, losing I've had this, losing a 30+ year friendship, because I trusted you with two of the most important things in my life. And then to come down and find out that you missed, I'm trying not to get emotional about it. I didn't have that trust in you. You used that against me, and I trusted you. But right now I love you, but I love you from a distance. The relationship will never, ever be the same, because that trust factor, I will never, ever get that part back. Never.
Yeah. And that's a loss. Mm-hmm. And it may not, again, and it's worthy of grief as much as, a family member who dies.
Right.
One of the things that I was going to say, well, two things. I wanted you to speak to, it's the little things that you don't think about. Mm-hmm. Holidays are horrible for me. Because my grandmother died 3 days before Christmas, and she was the matriarch then, Christmas has always kind of been different. And honestly, I don't celebrate it, but that's for different reasons now. I love to be present, but I don't need presents. Now I'm not going to turn away a gift. You know what I'm saying? I'm not dumb. However,
I got something for you. I guess I'm going to have to send it back.
No, you can still send it. But I missed being around people. And so my brother, his family, he's married, children. So they would do Thanksgiving together. I'm very grateful that they did it, that year and the year after. And then last year was COVID. So where some people got to see people and spend time with them, I did not. And when I tell y'all, sitting on the couch, I'm grateful. We had food. They did a food exchange, whatever. But, to keep each other safe, which I understand, that was lonely, sitting on the couch. I don't care how great the meal was. Even Christmas, that was like our gift. We got to go to, what's that name? It's an Annapolis steak restaurant. I cannot think of it right now. It's amazing, too. Love my gift. It was amazing. But sitting on the couch, eating my food by myself was horrible. And one of the things that Grisha spoke to, understanding and actually just processing through what you want to do when the holidays come. If, are you going to still bake the cookies that you used to bake? Are you going to go to the gift exchange that you used to go to? Are you still, or making new memories? So could you just speak to that real quickly, please?
For sure. Yeah. And those times are difficult. And there, again, isn't one right answer, right? For some people, living into that and doing that again is a way of memorializing, right? It's a way of processing that. And that's great. But the person that doesn't do that and needs to do something completely different, that's also okay. And so there's not one right way to respond, right? So, and those seasons are difficult because of the high relational components to them. And so we might want to do some of the same things because it's a way of connecting and it's a way of processing that. We might not be able to, and if so, that's okay. And like you say, replace it with other traditions. What might I do to honor this and to honor them in a different way? And it's interesting to me that Grief Share has not only their normal sort of regular groups, but they have specific sessions on surviving the holidays because it is a challenging issue. And again, we need to come up with things that will help us in those times. And it may be again time to be with family and maybe away, or maybe a combination thereof. Time to do the things we always did as a way to connect with them and remember them. They always made these cookies. We're going to make them and eat them, and it's going to be a tribute and a memory. And even we're going to cry as we do it, but it's going to still be meaningful. Great. If I can never eat that cookie again as long as I live because of that connection, and that's how, that's my process, then that's fine too. But you mentioned, the last 18 months. So this whole period through this pandemic has been one loss, right? These are losses, whether it's, and I'm thinking even of a year ago or 18 months ago, and, where, there were high school students, right, not having their prom. There were college students graduating and not having a graduation, not doing the things we would normally do. All of those things were losses. All of those things are things to be grieved. Early on in COVID, there was an article in the Harvard Business Review, and if that can get this right, it's I think a lesson to all of us. But the article, the title of the article was the word was discomfort. That discomfort you are feeling is grief. In other words, they were naming early on in the pandemic that this feeling of unsettledness that we were all having and all experiencing, this, Harvard Business Review of all places was saying, you know what? I think this is grief. I think this is loss. I think this is not just about, there's the sort of the health issue of this, there's the business impact, there's the school issues and all these things, and none of them are insignificant. But at the core of our processing of what we are going through and have been going through, it's a grief issue because it's a loss issue, right? And so whether or not it's this collective experience that we've had, and on the one hand, it's maybe made us ready to process that together. Maybe we can let that be a permission giving to say we've experienced some loss together that can connect us and maybe help us to process other kinds of losses together. I mean, that could be a hope. But the reality is that's what we're experiencing. And if we don't name it as such, we'll kind of miss the point and realize that, no, this is just something to be grieved as much as these other things that we've also named. And that experience, that shared loss, it's interesting to me. I had, I've been doing work on lament for a long time now, and talking about it, teaching about it, writing about it. I had more requests to do workshops and seminars on the topic of lament in the last 18 months than I probably had in, 5-6 years prior, because again, there was, I think, this hunger, awareness that we need language, we need permission, we need to talk these kinds of conversations like we're having right now, to really lean into what does it mean to experience grief and to do that in community, and to do better than we have by our silence, by our dismissals, by our over spiritualizing in one sense, by our not giving people permission to process things in the way that they need to and in the time frame that they need to not put timelines on it, to not put checklists on it, to let people grieve in the ways that that they need to. And there really isn't a wrong way to grieve. I think the only thing that's wrong is when we would get stuck in that in ways that wouldn't give us that ability to move forward, even though we know we're not moving on, we're not moving past, we're not getting over, but we do want to keep moving forward. And with God's help, we can do that.
True. Did you want to say something? Okay, maybe she can't. I'm not sure. Okay, so one, you said a lot of different things. I think so. When I went to grad school, we were taught. No, I don't believe in. And Dhyana and I were just talking about this. You don't tell somebody how long it should take. However, it's supposed to be like around the 2 year mark. If you're still grieving in the same manner, then that's when you may want to go get additional help, like see a counselor, see a therapist, see a psychologist, see a psychiatrist. It's not because we're saying you're not getting over but that there could be, I mean, death actually can lead to some mental health issues and concerns. And I have so many friends who have lost parents and siblings and friends. And I just found out my cousin died from COVID. He died last month. I just found out 2 days ago. He was 65. I feel like that's still fairly young. That's not the first person I know that's died of it. And it's just like one thing after another. And the person I used to be, that I would check on everybody and see how well they're doing, I don't even have the capacity to do it as much as I did, but I do still try to reach out a couple of times and check on people. You good? Because I understand how lonely I felt, because after the funeral, a lot of times people go on about their business as if everything has ended. And honestly, that's when things start, because when you're planning the service, you don't have time to actually focus on really what you're feeling, and heaven forbid if you have to clean up, stuff or clear out things, all those memories, all those secondary losses that we talked about. I love reshare. I send it to everybody. When you tell me somebody died, I'm letting you know about it. Right. But I also believe in therapy. And so if you could, just kind of speak to that, whether it's in community, which is Grief Share, it's a support group, or whether it's actual therapy. Could you just speak either to the importance of either or both for anybody who may be afraid of connecting? I'm thankful. I still speak to people in my class. You know what I mean? I still feel the loss when, we found out someone in class died, because I still spoke to them on social media. You know what I mean? And so I'm forever grateful for the bonds that we created, because if no one else got it, they understood.
Yeah.
Regardless of what type of loss it was, father, mother, whether it was actual loss or death. So could you just speak to that real quickly?
Yeah, again, I just believe so strongly in that kind of resourcing and support, right? We need support. Now, again, we can find the kind of support that will work for us where we are. There's not one answer there, but we need support. We need resourcing. We need friends. We need a faith community. We need a support group. We need someone that we can speak to, and define what will work for us. And I think Grief Share is a great example of what that can be, of a group that comes together. And there is, once you walk into that space, and even though our experience may have been differently, there's an awareness of, that the loss I'm feeling, I know that there are others who have experienced loss. And even if they're experiencing it in different ways, they're going to, be a kind of person that doesn't dismiss, right? Because they understand, the ways that can help. And so I think, as you say, if we're getting stuck, if we're not able to move forward, and we're not saying we're moving on, but if we're not able to move forward at all, we get stuck, and we're really not feeling like we're, letting the journey happen, then that's the time to look around and say, what other resources has God put in my world that I can reach out to? And that may be a friend, it may be a family member, it may be an organization like Grief Share, it may be a faith leader, it could be a therapist, but we're going to, again, it's okay to need that help, and we need, again, to affirm that, right, to normalize not doing this on our own. We were not created for isolation. We were not created to go through these things by ourselves. Again, we may need moments, right, of I just need to be by myself. That I'm not for sure. But overall, we were not created to go through something as dramatic as these kinds of losses by ourselves. And so other than those moments that we need of space and time and quiet and reflection and personal time, we really need to seek out the other, right? We need to seek out support from other people. And again, whether that's in a formalized way through grief share or therapy or counseling, or it's the informal support structures that I have, look around for the helpers, look around for the people that are support in your life, and where are they? And we need to be that for one another. We need to be looking for those, places of support and having those places of support even before we desperately need them. Hopefully we're building that kind of support and we're looking for it. And, sometimes we have to get creative. Sometimes we're going to have to say, I don't have it built in right now, so I'm going to go find it. And that might be looking up for the closest grief share group closest to me. I might need to go to someone that I know has gone through a loss and take this bold step of saying, I know you've experienced loss and I don't know what your journey has been, but I'm just struggling. And I wonder if we could just connect, could we have coffee or, whatever, and just reach out, and that's scary to do that. But I think we need that kind of support. We need to not think for one moment that we should have to go through this by ourselves.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I did. For me, I needed to be around people. And so I made a date. I reached out to my friends, even my friends from high school, Pam and Sharice, like both of them have families and they set aside their time and we went out to dinner, and there was people from church, that I went out with. Like I made sure I scheduled times. And then I also had to tell them, like, things happen. So people sometimes can't make things or whatever, but just please, the same thing that I tell people on here when we're talking about just mental health. If you say you're going to be there for a person, then be there. If you have to cancel, then at least try to reschedule, because when you're in that state, it's such a lonely place that if, like Danya was talking about, if I've opened up to you and I've asked you to, to participate or be there with me, I really need you actually to do what you said and show me that you care to reschedule. Danya, before we go, did you have any parting words? Getting ready to close it down.
No, but I just want to say thank you, Dr. John, for being here. It's been enlightening, and my journey is still going, and something totally different. Ashley is on me too, Lisa, about a book. So that's it.
Good stuff. And with that being said, Ashley, did you have any parting words?
No, just thank you. I spent tonight really taking in. So thank you.
All right, Dr. John, how about you?
Well, just thanks for, giving space for this kind of conversation. I think just, being willing to talk about it is such a huge step. And as we said early on, we don't do well with this topic. So the more we talk about it, the more we are able to, find others. Oh, I'm not the only one that, that has experienced loss. And it doesn't mean that it's the same, right? We're not comparing. It's not a competition. But I know I'm not alone. And so, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to normalize it. And don't be afraid to be the person that's willing to sit with someone in their grief and just say, I don't know what to say, but I can help you cry.
There you go.
Absolutely. Danya, go ahead and shout out. I'll finish. Go ahead and shout out your Rock for Life information.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, the Rock for Life Foundation. And our website is therockforlifefoundation.org.
All right, Ashley, thank you.
MasteringMindMattersNow.org, and you can follow us on social media at Mastering Mind Matters.
And then I did not put this out, any statements that we say, I should have put out in the beginning, but I was so engrossed. Our opinions. A lot of us have studied this, but, we are sharing this from our heart. So if you need professional therapy, you can hit one of us up and we will give you the information, but we are not acting in that role on here. And then if you want to connect with me, you can do so on my website. I don't know why. Okay, there it is. LisaLGilliam.com. The Stigma Breakers Collective, Ashley and Dhyana are part of that. And we want to come and speak to you all about different things, all things mental health. We share our own testimonies when we're speaking as well. And I think we're fairly reasonably priced for the knowledge and the information that we have. So the contact number to Starling is on all of our page for Stigma Breakers, but you can go to the website and get us there. Dr. John, thank you so much for just being willing. I think I contacted you like, I don't know, January, February. I knew I wanted this year, October 13th, 2021 to be different. And I wanted to honor my mom in a different way. And so what better way than educating people about grief and loss and death and doing it with such dignity. And I thank God that I got through the show without crying. Like, praise the Lord. That might not be a big deal to some people. And I might cry as soon as I get off, but I was able to not be as emotional. Oh, just real quick. I did want to say this is just the last thing. Thank you, God, for reminding me. One of the things that we talked about on there is how, to make sure you take care of yourself, make sure, try not to get involved in drugs and just sex and doing all the stuff that, we often do when we're hurting. And sad to say, I got involved in some of that stuff, not right away too. So I do want to encourage people to just be vigilant, eyes open, heart open, know where you're going. Because there were times where I was good and then all of a sudden, and it didn't hit me right away. For me, it was years later. And so as we close out, you'll have the last statement. Is there anything that you wanted to say to people who, like me, may have fallen or done what they shouldn't have done, or, as far as Christians or whatever, because of the grief that they were experiencing? Could you just leave us with a word of encouragement and or a prayer?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we take everything to God, right? And we trust God with our sorrow, our grief, our brokenness, our anger, our failure, right? And that when that happens, we have a place to turn with that, where we will receive mercy and grace and forgiveness and love and understanding. And so, we don't want to get stuck, right? But when we do, right, we can go to the one that can get us unstuck, and we go on from there, and we keep moving forward. And so just be encouraged, right? And this is because it's a journey, right? There'll be starts and stops. We'll feel like we're making progress, and then we feel like we're way back at the beginning again. That's okay. Just give yourself permission to feel what you feel, and then take that to God. And know that God can handle it. God's, receiving that and receiving you. And I just pray God's blessing upon all of us and anyone that's listening in your own journey of grief, to share your sorrow with those around you that can be a support, and with the God who created you and loves you and redeems you and calls you his own. You're the beloved, and you can offer all of that as an act of trust and prayer and faith and worship to God. And we're in this together.
Amen. Thank you so very much. Please tell the family I said hi. I'm so appreciative. I was definitely blessed. And I pray that everybody that was watching, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Just watching, and we appreciate it. I do have to announce this last thing. So Ashley, Danya, and I have extremely busy schedules, and I was supposed to announce this last month. We have decided that at this time, December will be our last live monthly YouTube. But all of us are still continuing to work together. We'll still come out and speak at your churches and your events, et cetera, et cetera. We might do some sporadic ones. We still plan on doing September for Suicide Prevention Month. It's some type of event. And then the Ministers Forum. We continued that, Pastor John. We actually did it at his church one time. So you and Ashley actually, all of y'all met. Now that I think about it. No, Ashley couldn't be at that one.
No, she was there.
She was there too. So see, yep, the only one. Aisha's not with us anymore. I just thought about that, and so we did continue the Ministers Forum, and that's in May, which is mental Mental Health Awareness Month. So we will continue to do things. Please continue to follow us on our social media platforms. We are so grateful for this started September last year, and I'm thankful for something that was supposed to be 1 month that God allowed to go for a whole year. So I thank you all. I really, really do. Thank you all so much, Ashley and Dahlia, and thank you, Dr. John. Like, you always have a place in my heart because you help me heal. So thanks, everybody. You all hold on. Let me just end the broadcast. We'll see you later.
Good night.
Please note, any comments made on this LLG Random But Real podcast by myself, Lisa One Senior Lady Gilliam, or my guests are our own views. They are not to be made or determine an actual professional or in lieu of an actual professional. If you relate to any of the topics, please seek professional help. Contact a therapist, a psychologist, any other mental health professional, or if it's an emergency, please call 911. Thank you so much for tuning in.